Thank you guys for joining us today for today's webinar. My name is Dwight Blair, Dental Product Manager here at Roland DGA, and of course, DG Shape is the manufacturer of our brand. And we are taking a dive into the DWX 52 DCI and this exciting new software, the new and improved V panel, and of course, Dwindex, which is of course the first software that we've released this year. So let's just talk about what we're going to discuss today. And the first thing here is the DWX 52 DCI itself. It's the latest disc changing device from DG Shape by Roland. It was released this year, and we'll talk about that in a second. And this is really for those of you who are thinking about buying one of our machines, or maybe you have a machine and you're thinking about buying another one, or you just want to know some software about it. So we'll overview that real briefly. The next thing we have here is vPanel 2.20. It's an improved maintenance software that comes with a lot of customizational features, and you also have the ability to manage multiple devices here, which is integrated with the 52DC and the 52D. And last but not least, we're going to discuss the Dwindex software itself. It's performance-based software that tracks metrics for tools, materials, and the utilization of the machine itself. And we'll show you how that works, how it's set up, and what information it gives you to help you make improvements to your production workflow. Just jumping in, what do we think about the 52 DCI? Well, of course, it was released this year, February 2018. For those of you who were at LMT Chicago, we kind of discussed it, showed you a few software things, cool things. And it's a second generation model. It's the next step after the 52DC. So that means, of course, it's taking all of those features, the expanded ATC, you have 15 housing slots, you have a 6-disc automatic tool disc changer, you have a cleaning tool, the ionizer, and all those cool features. And then we're adding a couple of new things, which is the disc rack, and the new software, of course, that would mean the Dwindex and the improved V panel. And of course, the reason why we went to kind of an adapter changing device is basically we've got some feedback from users in our market, and the main request was for ways to improve productivity. So I would like to really kind of dig into that real briefly, just to discuss what that means when we look at the 52 DCI. And it really could be a couple of different things. And the first is when we think about this concept called consistent milling. Sometimes if you think about the choice between purchasing a single unit versus a disc changing unit, the question becomes, how can I be more productive with one over the other? And the single unit will allow you, if you're interactive with it, to swap out jobs consistently. But it requires for you to actually, be engaged with the machine every time a job is completed. Well, when you look at a disc changer, you really have the options of setting up multiple jobs, and those jobs will continue to go without your involvement with the device. So the main concept of productivity there is being able to mill overnight, or being able to mill unattended. Maybe you want to go home for the weekend and kind of hang out with your family or your kids, or you have other businesses you might be involved in, or other activities that you participate in, but you don't want to let production in your laboratory diminish. So you continue to set up jobs, so when you come in, you can start the centering process or the finishing process. The other concept is this concept of unattended milling, where you can set up jobs and go do other tasks in your laboratory, and then come back and kind of load up a new set of material or a new set of discs for the future jobs you'll have. The other concept of being productive, of course, is this idea of material management. And if you've been checking out social media, you've probably noticed we've released a tooltip and a few other few more content regarding material management and how to set up your materials using barcodes, adapters, the rack, and the reader, which kind of similar to the way we used to manage multiple, should I say, compact disc or tape cassettes. You now can set up your disc and not have to re-index your partially used material. You can leave them in the adapter, take out your milled restorations, and leave it set up for the next job. So with that, let's just kind of dive into some of these cool little accessories you get with the 52 DCI. And if we can jump to our other camera, I can showcase just what that looks like for those of you who may not have seen this device and this is your first time. First, if you can look at this rack here, we have a full rack. You can set up about 13 individual adapters here. And that's in addition to the 6 housing slots we have into the milling device. So when we talk about, you want to set up a different job, you would basically select a letter in the CAM software once you finish setting up your job. And once you set it and push it through the machine, the device itself is going to run and find this specific adapter with the right letter. Of course, you have the ability to be able to customize the name for these adapters and track your material usage, which we'll talk about once we get into Dwindex software. Now, the other thing is, of course, with the rack, you also have different gadgets And when we talk about, let me just put this back in here, we talk about calibration and automated calibration. You also have this calibration jig that actually has its own adapter. So I'll turn that around, you'll see a number sign. But this is the way we kind of automate maintenance and make it a little bit more simplistic for you, where you can place this in any slot and continue. So with that, let's jump into vPanel. If we can go into my PowerPoint real quick and just talk about a couple of things that vPanel does. And the first thing it does, as we mentioned previously, it was the automatic maintenance or automated maintenance feature. You can press one button and start a calibration and start a spindle run-in, and you don't have to be involved with the machine while you do it. Of course, the next thing it does for you is it allows you to improve your job management, and that can come in a couple of different ways. For one, vPanel, this new vPanel we have, version 2.2, is the first software we have where you can actually monitor multiple milling devices that are not the same. So in the past, it used to be you had a vPanel for 51D or a 50. Now you can use one vPanel for the 52D, the 52 DCI, and the 52D, and monitor all of your jobs, what's going on, the maintenance that needs to be done, and tool life, as well as material management. The other thing it allows you to do is customize a few different things, and sometimes this is the thing that's missing that we don't really talk about much, and it's the tools, the adapters, the devices, and the alerts that you can set up, customize it to whatever naming conventions you want to give them, and monitor and track it using Dwindex software. And we're going to talk about that and showcase that. So if I could jump into my computer screen real quick, and we'll look at a couple of different things here. If you notice, we have for those of you who haven't seen this, this is the new and improved vPanel. If you notice over here on my left or right hand side, there is of the screen, should I say, there is a few different tools that have been set up all the way to slot 5, and you see maybe like some ones in different sections that you didn't see. Really what that's telling me is I have tools in each slot that have been partially used, excuse me, and there is an intelligent tool control, which is a little bit different, that's set up in slot 1, slot 7, and slot 8 and slot 12. And I'll talk about that in a second. On my right side, as you notice, I have a grayed out disc changer that has no discs that are red. The machine is on. It doesn't have any discs currently in the device. So if I take an adapter, and I'll do that now, even though you can't see it, and I'll place one in the machine, and what you will see is now it reads that there's a disc in place, but it doesn't know what it is. So in order for it to read that, I would have to press scan, or if I, let's say, place the job in production, the machine itself would go and try to scan a disc, find out where that disc is, and then place it into production for you. So this is one way we speed it up, where you don't have to worry about where you place your discs. You can place them in any section, any place you want to, and go from there. Now, another panel I will talk about while this machine is doing what it does is this job list section. And though we don't see any jobs here right now, normally when you set up the jobs and you send multiple jobs to the device at one time, you have an ability of organizing them in a specific order. And I'll showcase that once our device goes back up to the top. I'll click on this and show you just kind of what that looks like. And when we click here on the output file, if let's say I wanted to find a PRN file, I'd find it, plug it into the system, I'll click cancel. But once I get into that screen, I can actually organize those jobs from the first to the last. And then when I click import, it will automatically plug into vPanel, and then that's where this job list comes into play. So this job list over here on the left-hand side will list each job that I've placed. Now, the question that we've had in the past is always, hey, you know what, how can I reorder those jobs once they're in vPanel? Or how can I delete jobs and move other jobs up in the queue? Well, there actually is a way you can do that with the new vPanel. The first thing you need to make sure of is in our settings tab, this thing called enable data buffering is turned off. So if I uncheck that, I'll be able to delete jobs one by one in the job list without actually deleting all my jobs or needing to cancel all my jobs to reorganize them if I have a rush case, for instance. Now, with the enable data buffering feature on, what it really is allowing you to do is store multiple jobs onto the device itself, as it has an SD card built in, and you can unplug your computer. Some cases might call for a reason why you might need to do that, but in other ways you probably won't need to do that at all, so I would leave this unchecked by default. Now, when we jump into a customization of tools, this comes down to our milling burr management section. And looking at that section, of course, I have a few tools here that I've given custom names. And as you notice, this kind of setup is similar to this diagram here, where you can see kind of the tool life. But right here in the management screen, you will actually see the time frame that each tool has been used versus its replacement time. Now, these tools are custom set up here where I click on the milling burr registration, and let's say if I wanted to create a new tool here, I would click on add a milling burr. As you notice at the bottom, I have a new milling burr. I'd click on that, give it a name, and really the naming convention is up to you. I like to name my tools by the size and type, so let's just say I had a 1mm carbide burr. And let's say we were milling zirconia material and I had an idea that that tool would last maybe 30 hours or more. So I would click in the 30 hours, and once I click save, this tool is now going to be a new tool that I can select and place in my automatic tool changing slots. So I've given it a name. If I click close and go back to our initial tool setup, let's say I knew in slot 5 I was going to use that 1.0 carbide burr. And I would click on that, click OK, and now that tool is easily set up in slot number 5. Now when we set up our tools, we want to make sure they're set up with the CAM software requests or requirements. In most CAM softwares, for instance, I know for Mailbox users, once you get into setting up your job, before you fully publish, or should I say process everything, there is a quick screenshot that shows you where tools should be placed. Your tool should always be placed in its recommended slots. So if it's calling for slots 1 through 4 to have these specific tools, then that's great. Make sure you place it in those slots. But when we come to backup tools, and let's say we take advantage of that overnight or unattended milling aspect, there's going to be times where you extend past the maybe recommended replacement time, and you're going to need to set up backup tools. So let's say in slot 14, if I wanted to go there, I can select that 1.0mm carbide burr, place it there, and it automatically places in that this is slot 2, and I'm going to select it from slot 2 there. So you have customization of how you set up your intelligent tool control to back up your tools that are going to reach their expectancy or their life expectancy, and you also have the ability to set these tools up and give them the names that you need. Another cool feature of vPanel, of course, of customization is now when we have DWIndex, the ability to name your adapter. So if you click on the Settings tab, you'll see this new icon here called Material Registration. Initially, when the DWX52DCI was released, this was done in DWIndex. Now it is actually done in vPanel for better tracking. So you will click on the Material Registration tab, and notice I have a few different names here. I have adapter list all the way down to Z. And really, if I want to give a name, I would just select the adapter that I'm going to be using. And let's say if this was PMMA and I knew it was like a sage wax or something like that, or maybe there's a different name altogether, but the size is 14mm and I know it's a multi-shaded, I can put this information in and click save, and then what happens is now every time this disk is going to be called, it's going to be read by name when I jump into DWIndex software. So you have customization of naming your adapters in vPanel as well. The next thing you can customize, of course, is your alerts, and for that you would click on the Mail tab. Now you can place as many as receiver addresses as you want here, but there's only one sender address, and you would need to, of course, place your host name and your port number. But once you have that information, down here at the bottom you can customize which type of alerts you would like to receive. There's 3 options right now, and one of them is when your milling is finished, you can basically receive a report that gives you an email that says, hey, your milling job is complete. If there is an error that happens with your machine, let's say something happens that, or your air pressure was off and the job didn't start, or your vacuum wasn't sucking properly, you'll get those errors, and basically you can receive that via email, which is allowing you to be away from the machine and doing other things in your laboratory. Of course, the third thing is when maintenance is completed. When you do automated maintenance, it has a certain time frame. Usually calibrations take somewhere between 15 to 18 minutes, and the spindle run-in takes about 18 to 20 minutes. Once that's complete, you'll get an email that says, hey, this maintenance step is complete. You can come back to the machine and process your jobs. So that's another way you can customize things in vPanel. And of course, the way that you set up DWIndex is by actually selecting Enable Log Saving in the DWIndex tab. And basically, if I wanted to save this at a specific location, I could. And normally I save mine on the desktop, but let's say you had multiple devices you wanted to hook up, you might want to save that on the network. The last thing I will talk about here is when you set up your milling devices, we talked about machine selection and how you can select multiple different devices to manage in vPanel, or should you use vPanel to manage. And here where you see this connect machine selection, as long as these different devices are connected to your computer, you can use your computer and manage each one, and you'll get the choice of choosing which devices you want to bring in. So these are all cool customizable features that are listed in vPanel, and you can use those to your discretion. I would even say that you have the ability to customize the image of the actual machine you're using by right-clicking on the image here, and you can customize this layout of vPanel as well. So getting back into the PowerPoint here, if we look at a few things, of course, if we dive into DWIndex, we're going to do that next. So let's just look at that real quick. And DWIndex is the performance software for your DWX 52 DCI. Now, this can be combined with the 52 DC, but it only works for our disk changing devices. And the first thing it does is it gives you overall utilization tracking of the device itself, the tools that you place inside of the device, and the materials that you'll use on the adapters. The other thing it does is it gives you a very good detailed breakdown of all the daily, weekly, monthly track metrics. So that's going to also relay into the device usage that you'll set a time frame for, the tools, the burrs that you'll use, and of course those materials as well, and you will give those materials custom names. The last thing that it does, I would say, is it gives you the opportunity to compare multiple devices. And this is looking at any disk changing machine that DG Shape or DWX series produces, and you'll be able to look at each device and kind of determine where your productivity is high and low, and it allows you to kind of visibly make improvements to your CAD/CAM workflow or production workflow. And with that, let's look at DWIndex right now. If we can jump back into our screen here. And if you notice, we have a lot of details when we jump in. The first thing you need to do when you launch vPanel is you need to locate the folder in DWIndex software, or should I say when you launch DWIndex. So I would click on import once I open the software because it doesn't know where you're saving that specific file. Find the file that you have. Of course, I've saved mine to the desktop. And once I click on it, I can go ahead and select that folder. And now my data kind of imports into the software. Now there's certain weeks that I haven't pretty much milled anything. So I am going to basically jump in, make sure I'm in the right one here, and then I'm here. And now you'll see some data pop up. And I'm going to go back a couple of weeks just so you can see some actual work. So notice this week of productivity on the machine, we did quite a few milling for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but Thursday through Saturday, then nothing was done. So when you look at this top area here, I'm looking at an overall utilization of the milling device. It's showing me Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday how my productivity was based on the set goal that I have for the machine. So let's say my lab is in production for maybe 8 to 9 hours a day. I'm going to set my goal working time for my machine for 8 hours. And if I reach 8 hours or extend 8 hours, you'll see those days where you'll see, for instance, down here on Monday, I had 108% of productivity or production time based on the goal amount of time I wanted to use the machine. Now, when we look at setting that specific characteristic up, you go in and click on the Setup tab, and then here is where I control my goal time for wanting to use this device. I can go all the way up to 24 hours in a day. Currently I have mine set at 8, and then everything adjusts accordingly. So once I click on 8, I go back into the home screen, and basically you'll see that chart listed there. Now when we talk about materials and we talk about burrs, these are the other two things that the DWIndex tracks. So based on your naming conventions, if you notice here in the top right, I'm on material, and I can see all the material names that I've given to DWIndex software, should I say in vPanel, for each adapter. And each adapter here is going to be tracked by the total utilization based on that day, that week, or that month. And if I click on burrs as well, you'll also see the same thing. Now, the one very interesting thing I found when I was using, of course, Millbox software is normally when we think about CAM strategies and how materials are milled, you think that the roughing tool is used for the most of the time. And here you can see our 2mm tool is only used about, I would say, less than half of the 1mm tool, which is mostly kind of used to finish and do a little bit of roughing. So if I'm taking this data and now I have a visible look into how my machine is being used based on my CAM, I can say, well, you know what? I can use some sister tool backup slots or back up my 1mm tool more than I would do my 2, and maybe my 0.6mm tool I can have maybe 1 set up, and it just kind of helps you set up your machine for a better productivity or a better experience in your CAD/CAM workflow. Now, the other thing here is when we click on a daily breakdown, you can click on any of these days, or you can kind of cipher through this tab here, which will click through month and week, and you can see your production there. But if I go back to my week here, and I go ahead and go forward back to the day we were looking at. And I'm going to click on one of these days where, let's say, productivity was pretty interesting. Let's go with Tuesday. You notice I have 2 jobs. And the cool thing about this whole setup is if I want to kind of reorganize the information here, it works like Excel spreadsheet. So if my get material time is when a job is placed in production, my release material time is when the job is finished, and my total operation time here is the total amount of time it took to complete that specific job. Now, in addition to that data, you can look at tool time, which is like your 2mm burr, your 1mm burr, your 0.6 or your 0.3, and any other tools you might have set up. They're all going to be recorded based on the amount of time that they were used for that job, as well as the material. So if I want to kind of get an idea of, hey, how many tools are being used and get an estimate of how many units are being produced based on the units for each specific job, I can get that information here. The other thing is our job name is actually tracked as well. So that job name is going to be here. So I noticed that, you know, some small labs out there might have different mechanisms or spreadsheets or software they might use to track cases that are going into the milling device, and then they try to expedite that into their centering place by understanding which jobs have been completed. Well, this will show you each job, the time that it's been completed, the total operating time, so you can kind of use this list to manage your centering process if you would like. I always look at Dwindex software to kind of be that bridge in between lab management software, which kind of tracks case locations and determines how long they've been in a specific area, and that kind of influences backlog, versus this actually gives you the data that you use your machine and where cases are and where they've been completed. Now, when we really think about it from a management point of view, if I'm remote and I can look into this device and say, hey, you know what, we're not really doing much with this machine today or on these specific days, how can we better utilize it? Now I have data that I can actually look into and make better suggestions and understand what's going on with these milling devices. Or let's say you're at a place where you want to buy a new machine and you're thinking about expanding your CAD/CAM workflow where, well, this would be a device that I would use to say our productivity is at 200% based on our goal. Maybe we need to get something else in there to kind of improve that. Now, the last thing I will say Dwindex actually does for you, which I think is very cool, is if you go back into your weekly or monthly overview, you can compare multiple devices. And of course, I only have one DWX 52DCi hooked up, but if I had multiple disk changing machines, I would have a list of machines here showcasing the amount of time they've been used on a week, month, and a daily basis. And I can dig in and grab all the information if my tools have been set up properly in vPanel, and if my materials have been set up properly in vPanel, and I can make suggestions on what we could do to improve our production workflow. Now, let's say you might have those larger laboratories or users that have multiple milling centers or multiple geographical locations with maybe 1 or 2 or 10 milling devices. And if you have multiple disk changing machines, you can look at all of that information as long as you have one folder saved in the network where all the information is being saved. So now as a remote production manager, I can look at this and say, you know what, this milling center is producing very good. This one over here has a few machines, but they're only doing this. Maybe you decide at that point to repurpose machines for your other section and get more stuff done. And it helps your workflow. But before, you didn't have a tool to do that. Now you do. So if we get back into the PowerPoint presentation, we'll talk about recapping what we discussed today. And the first thing is, of course, being more productive. You have a choice of going overnight or unattended milling, and that's really up to you. If you want to leave for the weekend and have your machine work for you, you can do that. Or you can do overnight where you leave for the day and come back the next day and your jobs are ready to go. It's a great system. It's set up to allow you to be productive in many different ways. The second way of being productive, of course, is the speedy material setup that we have here, and that's basically using our adapter-based system, which I've kind of entitled the BAR, which incorporates barcodes, the adapter itself, the reader, and basically the rack that you can set multiple adapters up on, up to 13. And then, of course, there's automated workflows that we will employ in the future, and there'll probably be another webinar on that information, so stay tuned and stay plugged into DG Shape products and Roland, and we'll let you know when those things are released. The other thing it does, of course, is allows you to customize your setup. Yes, vPanel is a tool that you can monitor your maintenance. You can set automatic maintenance, and you can set up everything else, but you can really get alerts and customize the naming conventions of your tools, adapters, devices, and the alerts that you receive via email. The other thing, of course, is you can monitor the jobs on multiple devices, and that's always key to know how much time is left in the job once it's completed. And last but not least, of course, is now you have Dwindex software where you can capture the total utilization of everything that goes into the milling system, which kind of plugs in that gap between lab management software and the milling device going into the sintering process. And you can review results on multiple devices. So if you have multiple disc changing devices, you can basically review the productivity on each one. And last but not least, the most important thing about reviewing results, which is like self-visualization, is making improvements and improving the way that you manage your workflow and how these devices are used and what material you buy and how you set up your burrs. All right, well, I want to thank you guys for coming today and participating in today's webinar. Thank you for being a DG Shape or DWindex, or should I say DWX user. And for those of you who are participating today that are interested in buying a product, you're definitely not going to miss anything if you try our machines. Have a great day.
DG Shape was established in 2017. We have a dream to shape ideas and shape change. Our promise: to deliver a new model for intelligence and efficiency. To empower you to shape the future. We are committed to provide unique solutions to take advantage of the new digital frontier. For your business, for everyone. DG Shape